What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode of AI Inside. I'm one of your hosts, Jason Howell, joined, as always, by my co-host, Jeff Jarvis. Good to see you again,
Good
Jeff.
to see you. It looks like you didn't gain too much weight from all that pasta in Italy.
Let me tell you, there was a lot of pasta to be eaten in Italy. My youngest daughter, I'm pretty sure she probably matched the amount of pizza she's eaten in her entire lifetime in 2 weeks. Because I think there were many days where she had it breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It was like, I'll have a margarita pizza. Hey, when in Italy, I mean, that's just what you do, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's good to be
Welcome
back. I
back,
missed.
friend.
Yeah, thank you. I missed having the opportunity to talk with you about the news and everything. We had some
No,
great
you didn't. You had a
episodes.
great vacation. Admit it. That's fine. Now you're back and you're in the grind. It's
Well,
okay.
I had both things can be true at the same time. I and really enjoyed stepping out, but as we were talking about in pre-show, when you do a podcast, and I've done this long enough to encounter this time and time again, you step away from the topics. Stepping back in is always a challenge. It's like you have to catch up, and so I don't know that I'm fully there, but well, you're the pro to today and usually, but you're the one that's been connected to this stuff ongoing for the last 3 weeks, so you can tell me how it's going this time. Anyways, it's good to see you, Jeff. Before we get started, big thank you to those who support us directly on Patreon. You know who you are, and if you don't, well, that's probably because you're not a patron yet, and you should. Patreon.com/AI Inside Show. Like Anthony Downs, one of our supporters, you can support us directly and make sure that we continue to do this show each and every week like Anthony is. We really appreciate your support. Okay. This week, we are going to have a little bit of a flashback to the previous incarnation of AI Inside when I worked at twit.tv. Jeff and I were basically trialing this show for a number of months and kind of building what it would be. And we had the opportunity to talk with an impressive person, today's guest, in fact, Dr. Émile Torres, who is philosopher, historian, has a focus on existential risk and human extinction, of which there is plenty of fodder right now, unfortunately. My goodness. Not sure why you did that to yourself, Emil. That's got to be hard sometimes, but you last year published the book Human Extinction: A History of the Science and Ethics of Annihilation. And I mean, I could go on. Collaboration with Dr. Timnit Gebru. Basically, y'all coined the term TESCREAL, which comes up on the show so often. So, Emil, it's great to have you back. Although on this show you haven't been on. At Twit you were, but anyways, it's great to have you here, Emil. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, wonderful to be here.
Yeah, it's really great to talk with you again. And when I reached out, I think like a month and a half ago, you had mentioned that you had an FAQ on the TESCREAL bundle coming soon. Mm-hmm. And so we decided, hey, that's a really great opportunity to bring you on. And then, of course, I went away to Italy. So it had to delay a little bit. But just last month to your Substack, that's xriskology.substack.com. Hope I got that right. The TESCREAL bundle FAQ hit the site, hit your Substack. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today, because I know people, hear us talk about TESCREAL and we talk about it in bits and pieces. But I feel like when it comes down to it, you're one of the people that's really driving awareness around this. And, like I said, you coined the term TESCREAL. So you of all people are the right person to talk about this. So why don't we start with the basics, and then we'll get into a little bit about what's in the FAQ and go from there. I know we covered this a little bit previously, but for those who didn't watch, what is TESCREAL? We'll just start with the simplest question. Or is that simple? I don't even know.
Yeah, it's relatively speaking, it's simple.
Yeah.
So the concept of the TESCREAL bundle, this was the result of a collaboration that I was working on with Dr. Timnit Gebru, a computer scientist who used to work at Google. And we were specifically trying to understand what are the various ideologies that have shaped and are driving the current race to build AGI, or artificial general intelligence. And in the paper, writing the paper, we found to be somewhat unwieldy because we could not talk about the origins of the current race to build AGI without mentioning these 7 ideologies. And so at some point, I proposed the acronym TESCREAL in order to economize our speech and streamline our conversation so that we weren't just listing these 7 ideologies, which are represented linguistically by these quite large polysyllabic terms like transhumanism and singularitarianism and so on. And kind of once we had the TESCREAL acronym, it occurred to us that it really does, there are compelling reasons for thinking of these ideologies as constituting, and their various, the communities that have coalesced around each ideology in the acronym, as constituting a cohesive movement that really goes back to the late 1980s with the emergence of modern transhumanism, which coincided, it was coincidental with extropianism, the first organized transhumanist movement, extending from the late 1980s, early 1990s, all the way up to the present. So we thought, like, actually in the TESCREAL FAQ, I mentioned that there are 2 possible interpretations of the TESCREAL thesis. One is the weak, you could call the weak thesis, and the other is the strong thesis. The weak thesis simply states that you cannot provide a complete explanatory picture of the current race to build AGI without referencing these 7 ideologies. Referencing these 7 ideologies is absolutely crucial for making sense of what's going on. The strong thesis is that these ideologies really do form this bundle. And in our paper, we defend both. So we also, in particular, we defend the strong thesis that we really should be thinking about these ideologies as just a single wriggling organism that extends from the late 1980s all the way up to the present. So all of that being said, the acronym itself stands for transhumanism, extropianism, singularitarianism, cosmism, rationalism, effective altruism, and long-termism. And I'm happy to discuss what each of these ideologies are, but essentially you could think of the backbone of the TESCREAL bundle as transhumanism, because all of the other ideologies really just grew out of the transhumanist or modern transhumanist movement. So the first 3 letters after T, so the TESC part of TESCREAL, those are just variants of transhumanism. Cosmism, singularitarianism, extropianism, those are variants of transhumanism. Rationalism, effective altruism, long-termism, those were introduced by people who were very much involved in the transhumanist movement. So transhumanism is sort of the through line, as it were, the common denominator of all of these ideologies. And again, the central claim is that these ideologies form a single cohesive movement that has been instrumental, absolutely integral in launching, sustaining, and accelerating the current race to build AGI.
So let me ask 2 questions to start off with. And I want to get to this, but some news and things that have happened since we last spoke. So I want to get to those. But continuing the background here, if you could also explain, well, first, AGI, artificial general intelligence, the belief that the machine will be made to outdo our capabilities on a general basis. I, for one, think that's BS. It's not going to happen. I'll be eager to hear, if there's where you think that is on a scale of possibility. 2 is that this is all related to what people have probably heard more about is doomerism, the doomsters, the people who think that this AGI could get so out of control, it could destroy us, and a few people have the wisdom, having made it, to control it, and we should give them power and money. But the third thing I'd like you to address in that is how, and I think this is so critical for people to understand how all this relates to eugenics. When I try to scare people about what this stuff is, and I say, listen, it's not just a bunch of crazy geeks saying they're all powerful. It's got this larger agenda of making the new Ubermensch. And so if you don't mind extending your background for just another minute, if you could hit on those things, Émile.
Sure. Yes. I mean, fantastic questions. In terms of possibility, my focus these days is mainly on the us philosophers would say the normative question of whether we ought to build AGI, as opposed to the question of whether or not it's even possible. So one of the claims that Gabru and I make in our article is that AGI is inherently unsafe. because it's an unscoped system. So if you want to apply established standards of risk assessment to a technology, you need to first have a clear definition of what that technology is and what it's supposed to do. So like the computers that we're using right now, like they're well scoped. They have particular functions and so on. Once you understand those functions, you can apply these norms, these standards of risk analysis to determine how safe or unsafe the technology is. AGI is not like that. It's this godlike system that will be able to perform at or above human level in terms of intellectual capabilities in every cognitive domain of interest. Mathematics, social persuasion, scientific innovation, art, creativity, and so on and so on. So it's just an inherently unsafe. I don't know if it's possible. Maybe it is. Like Gary Marcus, for example, makes the argument that the large language models that are powering ChatGPT and various other chatbots, a lot of the image generation technologies that we have out there, these LLMs are an off-ramp to the road to AGI. So in fact, he tweeted, I believe just today, that he believes AGI will be built at some point, but not as a result of just scaling up these large language models. So my point of mentioning that is there's a variety of different views. My own opinion is like, I don't know, maybe AGI is possible. But again, I'm much more interested in the question of whether or not we should be trying to build AGI in the first place. Actually, this ties into the second question about doomerism. There are sort of two camps within the TESCREAL movement. There are the doomers and the accelerationists.
Right.
And it's not, there's a spectrum that separates them. So people can fall, anywhere along the spectrum in between those two extremes. I think the important thing to recognize is that all of the doomers, at least all of the most influential and prominent doomers within this TESCREAL tradition, they are not opposed to building AGI. They're opposed to building AGI in the near future. And so, Elias Yudkowsky, maybe the most famous AI doomer out there. Jan Tallinn would be another example, co-founder of the Future of Life Institute, and so on and so on. All of these individuals want AGI, and they want AGI as soon as possible. They just believe that we're not sufficiently prepared to build systems that are at or above human level intelligence. So above human level intelligence, that would be referred to as superintelligence, sometimes abbreviated ASI for artificial superintelligence. So you've got AGI, which is a broad class, and then you've got ASI, which is a subclass of AGI, right? Because AGI would include human level, ASI is just superhuman intelligence. So all of these individuals want AGI. One way to think about the situation and what motivates the doomer narrative, the doomer movement within the TESCREAL community, is that you have AGI capabilities research. So the capabilities research is focused on trying to build an actual system that does outperform humans in virtually all cognitive domains of interest. And then you've got AGI safety or AI safety. And this is a field that emerged directly out of the TESCREAL movement that is trying to solve a problem that's sometimes called the value alignment problem or the control problem. So if we create a system that is super intelligent, how exactly do we get it to do what we intend it to do? So this is the alignment problem. If we ask it to eliminate cancer, all cancer in humans, maybe being extremely clever, but also very sort of single-mindedly focused on this one particular goal, the ASI goes out and just kills everyone. Because if you kill if there are no more humans, then there's no more human cancer.
Yeah.
Okay, so then you add a constraint that says, well, don't kill everyone, and so it goes, okay, I'll just kill most people around the world, but I'll leave 1 million people in like a pen, and I'll cover the rest of terrestrial Earth with laboratories to try to cure cancer. And you go, okay, that's not what we want either. So you add another constraint. And the point of this exercise is that you can go through this iteratively over and over again, keep adding constraints. And then once those constraints are added, sort of figure out other ways that there could be catastrophic unintended consequences. So AI safety is trying to figure out this problem of how it is that we code into the system a set of values that aligns the behavior of the ASI with what we want for the future of humanity. And so you've got AI safety and AI capabilities, or AGI safety, AGI capabilities. Right now, if time goes this way, you've got capabilities that are here. Let's say this is the AGI finish line. That's where we get AGI. You've got capabilities research here, and you've got AI safety research here. And so the claim is that if the capabilities research crosses that finish line before AI safety research does, then you get, by default, a catastrophe. Meaning probably everyone on Earth dies, because there will just create this technology that is extremely powerful, that has agentic properties. So it's an agent in its own right. That makes it qualitatively different than any other kind of technology. There's no way to control it at that point. It's thinking 1 million times or more than 1 million times faster than we are, which means that when it looks out at the world, it sees us as essentially frozen in time. So maybe we're like struggling to go unplug the machine, but the 2 seconds it takes for us to unplug the machine, that in terms of subjective time for the ASI, that's like 200 years. So it's got all the time in the world to like figure out how to prevent us from actually unplugging it. So all of this is to say that the doomers are worried about this configuration where capabilities research is leading the way with AI safety.
You're so extremely, in what I still think is BS, you're so extremely fair to them, giving them an appropriate, I think they would say, explanation of what they see. So I appreciate that intellectually.
It's spot on. It's an excellent visualization. It really encapsulates exactly what we're up against. Yeah.
So I'm sorry I interrupted.
No, that's fine. I am trying to be charitable. I mean, I think that a lot of the problems within AI safety, I think, are the problems themselves are deeply problematic, are flawed in various ways. The frameworks are all wrong. So I have, this would be a charitable interpretation of their view. And also the reason I mention it this way is just to say that as soon as the situation reverses and AI safety is ahead of AI capabilities, all of the doomers would say pedal to the metal. Because AGI or superintelligence is absolutely key. It is integral for realizing this very bizarre techno-utopian vision that is motivating the TESCREAL movement, according to which we will use superintelligence to figure out ways to completely re-engineer humanity, essentially resulting in, almost certainly resulting in the extinction of our species. Maybe that would happen in the very near future. TESCREALists would be completely fine if there were no more Homo sapiens and we were replaced by some new post-human species. So in a sense, the TESCREAL movement is very pro-extinctionist. Don't let their rhetoric fool you. And not only will we re-engineer humanity, but we go out and colonize space. We plunder the cosmos for its vast resources, what they call our cosmic endowment of neg entropy, which stands for negative entropy. So just basically usable energy. So, and part of the plan then is to build literally planet-sized computers on which to run virtual reality worlds where you could have trillions and trillions of people. Some of these individuals, like Nick Bostrom, who has been involved in every single one of the TESCREAL ideologies, from the T to the L. He estimates that if we colonize space, there could be on the order of 10 to the 58 digital people in the future. So that's a lot of people. That amount, that number, so that's a 1 followed by 58 zeros. That is a much, 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 much larger number than the total number of people who exist today. So that makes the future way more important than the present, which in turn motivates this idea that we need to build safe superintelligence whereby AI safety leads the way in front of AI capabilities as we cross the AGI finish line. But we need to do that as soon as possible. So, because once we have superintelligence, then we get to live forever. We get to become post-human. We get to colonize space and create this literally astronomical amount of value in the far future. So to sort of summarize key points here, the difference between the accelerationists and the doomers is important, but also very slight, because both of them share the exact same vision of the future. It's about going out and conquering the universe, becoming post-human beings, uploading our minds, and so on. That is the vision. All of them accept essentially the exact same futurological picture that we ought to be striving towards. They just disagree about the near-term risks of AGI. So people like Yudkowsky, famous doomer, arguably the most influential doomer in the world today, thinks that if we create AGI in the near future, there's a 99% chance or greater that everybody on Earth will die. And that would be very bad. His institute, called the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, just released their 2024 communication strategy document. And if you look at I believe it's footnote number 1, they say right there, do we think we should never build superintelligence? No, we need to build superintelligence as soon as possible. It is a key part of fulfilling our long-term potential over the coming millions, billions, and trillions of years. But we just need to make sure that AI safety is in front of AI capabilities. And so the accelerationists just think, actually, the default outcome of building AGI in the near future is utopia. It's not doom. And so we shouldn't worry so much. And in fact, even if there are risks, this is another key claim that a lot of accelerationists make, even if there are risks associated with AGI, the best way to solve those risks is not through like government regulation or something of that sort. It's through the free market. So if we just open source everything, we have 1,000 or 1,000,000 companies out there that are all building their own AGIs or their own superintelligences, then okay, like maybe there's like 10 apocalyptically bad AGIs. Sure, but there's 1,000,000 good AGIs that are going to neutralize.
Be even smarter. This is Mark Andreessen's gospel.
Exactly. Yeah. So I feel like I spoke a lot there, but I got to at least 2 of your questions. So,
well, real quickly, eugenics. Real quickly.
Yes. So I would say that maybe the first thing to note is that eugenics is this idea that there are ways of traditionally ways to alter the reproductive patterns of a population to improve humanity. This idea, it goes back to the very origins of the Western tradition. Ancient Roman law, the ancient Greek philosophers, Plato and Aristotle, both endorsed eugenic policies like infanticide, targeting specifically babies with congenital deformities. And this idea has popped up over and over again throughout Western history. In the decade after Charles Darwin published On the Origin of Species, 1859 was when he published that. I think it was exactly 10 years later, if I'm remembering correctly, his half-cousin Francis Galton published a book called Hereditary Genius, which introduced the first quote-unquote scientific version of eugenics, whereby he was using Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection to argue that we should be able to use something like natural selection, a kind of artificial selection, to encourage the most fit individuals to reproduce more while preventing individuals who are the least fit, quote unquote, from reproducing. And then over, transgenerationally, over many generations, the human population will improve. Our health will improve, we'll become smarter, and so on. And so this was so-called scientific eugenics. Eugenics was hugely popular among both sides of the political spectrum, particularly in the early 20th century. Progressives loved it. Fascists loved it. The Nazis, of course, made it quite famous and dreaded. I mean, they've sterilized, I think, 400,000 people or so in Germany. So all of the reason I'm digressing here is to say that eugenics goes back to the beginning of the Western tradition, and it's never gone away. And so consequently, there were two French scholars who talked about the eternal return of eugenics. And one of the claims that Gebru and I make is that the TESCREAL movement is just the most recent iteration of the eternal return of eugenics. So transhumanism itself is a version of eugenics. That is uncontroversial. You can go to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, look it up. It's a kind of eugenics. And in fact, it was developed in the 20th century by some of the most prominent eugenicists in the Western world, like Julian Huxley would be a prime example. And the difference between transhumanism and eugenics, this gets at why I call transhumanism eugenics on steroids, because the traditional eugenicists of the 20th century, going back to the late 19th century, what they wanted to do was use science, reason, maybe technology to improve the human stock as much as possible, to create the most perfect version of our species that we could actually create, while simultaneously preventing our species from evolutionarily degenerating over time. Transhumanists like Julian Huxley said, why stop there? Why stop at perfecting humanity? Why not transcend humanity? Why not create? He didn't use the term post-human, but he was employing the concept in arguing that we should just transcend humanity entirely and just become a new superior species. And so this idea then combined with the fact that there were breakthroughs in certain fields of technology in the second half of the 20th century, from like the 1970s onwards, like genetic engineering. And so for the first time, people thought like, okay, if the eugenics on steroids, i.e. transhumanist goal, is to create this superior new species, call them post-humans. And now we have these technologies that enable us to actually modify our genes. And maybe there's like AI systems that we could merge with, or nanotechnology that we could inject, nanobots we can inject into our bloodstream that enhance our cognitive functioning, enable us to live forever and so on. Then actually we don't need the old techniques of 20th century eugenics, where like forced sterilization and stuff that was aimed at changing population level patterns of reproduction. No, in a single lifetime, over a single generation, if you're talking about parents and children, we may be able to use these emerging technologies to radically modify ourselves. And so this is how modern transhumanism was born. It was this marriage between this eugenics on steroids idea of transcending humanity and the fact that these emerging technologies were being developed, and sort of the realization that, yeah, Ray Kurzweil calls them GNR technologies, genetics, nanotech, and robotics, which includes AI. These GNR technologies could enable us to just radically modify ourselves to become post-humans ourselves. And so one implication of this is that because all of the TESCREAL ideologies emerged out of the backbone that is modern transhumanism, all of these ideologies directly came out of a modern eugenics movement. All of them are infused and imbued by the legacies, the values, the ideas that are central to the eugenics movement. And so in a very, I think, really important sense, the entire AGI race, by virtue of being driven and inspired by the TESCREAL worldview, the entire AGI race is infected with.
That's a good way to put it. It doesn't mean that it's essentially that, but it's infected by that. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. I mean, but I would say, once you start to sort of look around the literature surrounding AGI, I mean, there's just
It's in it
evidence.
all. Yeah.
It's in it all. I mean,
It's
there was
integrated.
one of the examples that got a lot of attention maybe a year ago or so was that some researchers published this article titled, I believe it was Sparks of AGI. The Sparks paper is how it's known. And it claimed that in GPT 3.5, GPT 4, you can find the evidence of general intelligence. That these systems are, actually getting us closer to the ultimate goal, the holy grail, which is human level intelligence. And the reason I mention this is that their definition of intelligence came directly from an individual who argued that certain racial groups are intellectually, for genetic reasons, intellectually inferior to other groups. So, I mean, this is
it's all tied together.
It's all tied together. So you see traces and residues of the worst aspects of 20th century eugenics all over the TESCREAL movement and all over discussions about AGI. So I do think there's a kind of substantial connection there.
That's really clear.
It's not a mere association.
Yeah. So I guess the question that comes up for me then is, because we continue time and time again to hear about the march towards AGI. Yes, from the people that you point out in your FAQ, Nick Bostrom, Sam Altman, Elon Musk, and the others who, could very easily be looked at and fit into the TESCREAL kind of bucket. But you also hear about it from people who are just, coming from the perspective of, well, this is just the natural evolution of the way we work with technologies, is that technology is always about pushing forward and progress and in air quotes and stuff. And isn't AGI isn't a, widely wise and almost humanistic technology that is as powerful as we are, if not more. Isn't that the obvious endgame of what we're trying to do as people who are building technologies? I mean, is it possible to do AGI responsibly in light of everything you're saying here?
I mean, maybe, but I think we would need a completely different framework. So a couple things come to mind when you mention this. One is that 20 years ago, really before, I mean, maybe even just 10 years ago, almost nobody was talking about AGI. Right. There was a huge amount of research in the field of AI, but it was mostly focused on sort of narrow AI projects, narrow AI technologies. And so these are technologies that focus on a particular task. AGI is different. It is supposed to be this universal technology. You can use it, the same exact algorithm or algorithms, in any domain, and it will outperform humans, as opposed to earlier work, which was just focusing on designing this particular algorithm, which will do this specific thing. In which case, oftentimes the established standards for risk assessment are applicable and are useful. And so what caused that shift from these sort of this focus on narrow AI to artificial general intelligence? It was the TESCREAL individuals,
right.
who said we have this universal system that is the key to techno-utopia. And so I suspect maybe there are ways of just trying to build some kind of more general system that are responsible. But the fact is we live in this particular timeline. And this particular timeline has been, the reason we are where we are right now, with billions of dollars being funneled into these companies that are explicitly trying to ultimately build superintelligence, is because these individuals shifted the discussion. They changed the landscape of the field of AI because their TESCREAL techno-utopian vision appealed to billionaires, who want to live forever, want to colonize space. So billionaires are like, okay, I'll give you, a huge amount of money to start DeepMind or OpenAI, whatever. And so that's how we ended up here. And it's why I would say just the whole framework is deeply problematic. We need to jettison the whole framework, I think, and start again. And then maybe there is a path towards more general systems that would, be responsible and not associated with this tech utopian hype. Sorry for talking over you. Sorry.
Not at all. Oh, that's why you're here. Jason, in response to your question, I'm curious what Émile will say about this. The way I've been looking at it, and I think I've said it on the show, is I see the general is not a bad word because it's a general machine. And we're concentrating too much on the technology as if it had full agency, which is part of the question. But to me, it's a general machine. And that means that AI, the subset LLMs, like the printing press, are general machines. That is to say that anybody could make them do anything. And thus to think that we can build in guardrails and safety into it is foolhardy. The issue isn't the technology. The issue is us as human beings. And there is no way to predict how human beings, malign human beings, or even well-intentioned human beings doing things accidentally, every possible bad thing that they could ever do with this. And so that also leads to a question. So to me, the idea that we can build in this kind of safety, I think, is foolhardy, and it ignores the reality of where we have an amoral machine. It's just amoral. It doesn't have morality. And so trying to hold the model makers responsible for what happens with everything that could ever happen with a model maker. There's legislation in California right now that says that model makers have to sign a statement under penalty of criminal perjury that their systems are safe, versus the author, the user, whether that's Martin Luther with the printing press or whether that's some schmuck who uses an LLM to do something dastardly. That's where a lot of the responsibility lies. And I think we're looking at it as if the technology matters when it's the humanity that matters. Does that make any sense to you?
It does, yeah. And sorry for the noise just a moment ago.
It's okay.
Yeah, so it does. I actually, I mean, feel free to push back if you think I'm wrong about this, or if I've misunderstood your position. But I sort of think that there's a tension between two of the things that you said. Maybe I'm wrong, but on the one hand, this idea that technology is this kind of neutral thing.
No, not neutral at all. It has prejudices, but it doesn't. But you have to include in your calculation of what it does how we choose to make it do something, how we design it, or how we ask it to do things, or what our input is. That the humanity has an impact that I think is being ignored in this discussion, as if the technology were a separate being. That's more what I'm trying to say.
Okay, so I think we're in total agreement then. I see technology as, in general, in the vast majority of cases, maybe all cases, as a non-neutral entity. Mm-hmm. So there is it's in the philosophical vocabulary, it is the value neutrality thesis. This idea that technology is just this inert thing, and it's entirely up to the user whether or not
I see what you're saying. Right.
Yeah. So guns don't kill people. People kill people is a classic. But actually, a lot of philosophers of technology would say, no, technology is absolutely infused with the values of its creators, which I think gets at your point. These AI systems aren't just like all of the talk. The vast majority of talk tends to be to focus on these technologies. Are these AI technologies themselves dangerous? And you sort of forget about the fact that there's a huge amount of human labor that goes into the creation of these technologies, that their design is the result of intentional decisions that humans have made. So this gets at why I've tweeted on many occasions, I'm much more worried about AI companies and the individuals who are leading these AI companies than I am about AI. Because you're totally right that it's
yes, exactly. I couldn't agree more. You're quoted at length in my upcoming book. Do I have a copy here? Yes, I do. The Web We Weave. I got to always be selling. Always
Very
be
nice.
And at the end, I say what scares me is not the technology, but the people. And it's because of you showing me the crazy crap that these people believe in. Let me switch, if I can, to two news things around this. I'm curious. Since we last talked, no one was covering TESCREAL. It was hard to get it into media. I think it's still extremely difficult to get journalists The New Yorker has done a big thing about the long-termists, and they just completely ignore all the bad sides that you pointed out. And, they can present somebody's view of the world. That's okay. But at least, for God's sakes, do the reporting. They're not doing it. They're not calling you. They're not quoting you enough, both you and Tim McGiveru. Two quick news things. One is the Guardian, not too long ago, let's see, when was this? In June 16, so very recently, reported on Sam Bankman-Fried's ties to an organization with racist, that is to say eugenics, roots. And it mentions TESCREAL. Yay, right? And the other thing that is the person you've already mentioned, who's kind of the philosopher king of the TESCREAlists, Nick Bostrom, got ousted from Oxford, and his center there got defunded. Do you think that there's a little bit of traction around the reporting you've done here and awareness of this, or are these random events?
I think there is growing interest in the idea and a growing recognition that this concept is important for understanding what's going on. I mean, I've said before that I think one of the virtues of the TESCREAL acronym, in addition to the fact that it presents the ideologies in roughly the same order that they emerged historically, but one of the sort of philosophical theories about what explanations are supposed to do is that a good explanation unifies. So a good, Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection, there's just this vast amount of data out there, all these different phenomena, and it organizes them all under a single idea. So that is to say that I think the TESCREAL concept does that as well, because I've spoken to scholars on numerous occasions over the past year and a half, some of whom have gone to Silicon Valley and embedded themselves in these communities. And they've told me, like, yeah, I'm like, I know transhumanism is like, it's omnipresent in Silicon Valley. It's the water that these people swim in. It's the air that they breathe. And also like long-termism, but like, how exactly does, EA fit into that? Like long-termism is kind of a version of EA. And then there's the rationalist community, which is kind of a sibling community to EA. And there's a huge sociological overlap. A lot of people who consider themselves EAs are also rationalists and so on. And then when they heard the TESCREAL term, they were like, okay, that is so useful. It's just unified. It provides this unifying framework.
It does.
So I think that's part of the appeal. I think people are starting to recognize, like, oh, actually, it is useful in trying to make sense of where this AGI race came from, what's sustaining it, what is accelerating it. Half of the picture is, at least at this point, profit, right? But these AI companies are unique in the topography, in the sort of capitalist landscape that's the milieu that we're all in. Fossil fuel companies, they're motivated. How do you explain their behavior? Profit motive. And then you have pretty much a complete explanation. These AI companies, DeepMind, OpenAI, Anthropic, XAI, and so on. How do you explain their behavior? Well, profit motive is a part of the picture.
Also, when capitalism becomes a religion with these overtones, it's hard to then beat it down.
Yeah, absolutely. And so capitalism has become intertwined with, there's a sense in which the TESCREAL vision of the future is just techno-capitalism on steroids.
Right.
It's about going out, maximizing value, plundering the cosmos, colonizing, expanding, extracting, and so on and so on. And so, I think, TESCREAlism is the other key part of the picture. And I think people are starting to recognize that, back in late 2022, so this was when long-termism was just starting to get some attention from the media. And that was because William McCaskill, co-founder of the effective altruist movement, had just published his book, What We Owe the Future. And he was on The Daily Show. He got coverage in New York Times, New Yorker, Time Magazine, and so on. So people were just sort of scratching their head going, what is this long-termist ideology? What, where did this come from? Like, what does it think we ought to be striving towards collectively as a species? And so I remember talking to a number of journalists, because I was in the long-termist community for 10 years. I mean, I was a true believer. I'm literally listed as I believe it's the 5th or the 6th, I can't remember, 5th or 6th most prolific contributor to the existential risk academic literature, which is, existential risk is the key concept within the long-termist movement. So I'm very proud of that. I have a certain street cred. So I talk to these reporters and I tell them, here's what the vision is. It's about reengineering humanity, colonizing space, creating computer-sized, planet-sized computers to run virtual reality worlds. And over and over again, the journalists would come back to me a month later and say that I spoke to my editor and there's no way we're going to publish the interview or the article, because my editor told me whoever I spoke to like clearly just is exaggerating or doesn't know what they're talking about or whatever. And then the end of the story is that invariably, there were probably like 5 cases like this, maybe more. 6 months later, I get those same journalists coming back to me saying, my editor told me whoever you spoke to before, go talk to them again. Because we need to do a story about this. Because people just, once people had a bit of time to actually, sort of like listen to what Bankman-Fried and McCaskill and so on have to say, or actually read some of the papers that I had recommended that are canonical, really influential within the TESCREAL literature, they realize, oh, actually, I'm really not exaggerating. I'm not being hyperbolic at all. This really is the vision. So I think that's also partly why this TESCREAL concept seems to be gaining some traction. Now has a Wikipedia page, which is kind of nice.
Yeah, which was taken down and is now back up.
Yeah. I actually had a friend who's a postdoc at Stanford, and there was a undergraduate. He told me this a couple months ago. Undergraduate who walked in, who he'd never met, and they got to talking. And at some point, the undergrad said, "Can I ask you just kind of an odd, random question? Do you know what TESCREAL stands for?" And this is just some random kid at Stanford. So, yeah, the idea seems to be making the rounds. Hopefully, because it's again a useful framework.
Well, Emile, I can't believe how much fun you make it talking about doom.
Right.
But it is intellectually fascinating.
Yeah, captivating.
Captivating is a good word, Chris. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I like I am actually like deeply, deeply pessimistic about the future, but there's a line that I heard a couple of years ago, which is like, I'm pessimistic, gloomy, I'm pessimistic, hopeless, whatever, but that's no reason to be gloomy. That was the line. And I feel that might as well have a chuckle. So
thank you for the nightmares and the chuckles together.
There we go. Oh, all living harmoniously while they still can together. Emile, really appreciate you taking time. Again, one of the questions that I had, which you totally talked about, was how far TESCREAL as an understanding has come since the last time we talked to you. Because definitely when the last time we talked to you, it felt like a terminology, and it was a terminology that was still pretty young. And I've certainly seen a lot more of it bouncing around the AI circles, that understanding of what it means. And you're the perfect person to talk about it. So thank you
so much
coming back with us today to talk about this. I have plenty of questions that we didn't have time to get to, so we'll have to have you back again. xriskology.substack.com for people who want to go, yes, of course, read the FAQ on the TESCREAL bundle, but all of Emile's writings on their Substack can be found there. Anything else you want to point people to before we let you go, Emile?
Maybe Twitter. I mean X. For some reason,
no, it's Twitter. It's Twitter.
Okay, Twitter. So xriskology on Twitter. I do still tweet a lot, so that's a good place to keep in touch.
It's hard to stop.
And people should reach out if they have any questions, or I'm always eager to chat with people. So
excellent.
Thanks so much.
We appreciate your time and your kindness. Thank you for doing what you do, Emile, and we'll talk with you soon.
Thanks for inviting me.
All right. Take care. All right. Fascinating. Knew it would be. We've been to this rodeo before.
They're just great.
Emile.
I mean, every time you just get as captivated is the right word, because the research is deep. The understanding of this is deep.
Mhm.
And it's important. It's really important. And I want people to pay attention to what they're reporting on.
Yeah, 100%. All right,
So
we do
now,
have some
we're going to
news.
chronicle doom and see how close we're getting.
Yeah, we'll pair up what we just talked about with what's happening in the world of AI and news. We've got a small smattering of stories before we round out this episode, so that's coming up in a moment. All right. Definitely with the news, the way it shaped up this week, anyways, there was so much. And like we said at the start of the show, like me being gone for 3 weeks and not really having my fingers on the pulse of all this stuff, coming back in, it's like, man, what is the most important thing? So I just basically, you created a huge list of options and I just waited for the emotional reaction to hit me to be like, oh, that sounds really interesting. So I don't know if these are necessarily the most important news stories in the world of AI, but they're certainly interesting. And you grouped them nicely. So why don't we start with the world of disclosure when it comes to AI? We're starting to see more and more examples of how companies like Google and Meta are requiring disclosure in a number of different ways. One example here, of course, that you had added is that YouTube is tweaking its policies. They actually last month, YouTube started a new policy silently. So they revealed on their help documentation, this wasn't announced necessarily, to allow users to issue takedown requests for AI generated content, as well as synthetic content, that sort of stuff that simulates the user's face and voice. A user would need to fill out a YouTube privacy request directly referring to the content in question. And then YouTube will use its judgment to determine what it does from there. So it's really asking the question, like, is the subject famous? Is this parody or satire? Was AI usage disclosed properly? Is it, quote, sensitive behavior that's being exhibited? All that stuff that is aimed at, I guess, giving users of YouTube at least a little bit of a say if their face or their voice is imitated in a way that they don't agree with.
And there are others in this little trendlet here where Google is requiring disclosure of digitally altered content and election ads.
Oh boy,
particularly, right?
I have an immediate reaction to the word election right now. Anyway,
tell me about it. Yeah,
but yes,
I'm glad. I was kind of surprised you came back from Europe, Jason. You had to deal with the dogs. I think that's probably why you're back.
Yes, totally. They were
small. And then Meta has added a made with AI label to stuff. And here's the funny thing you won't know because it happened while you were gone. Micah Sargent. I know somebody named Mika Sifri, and there's Micah Sargent.
Right.
Was the host substitute for Leo on last Wednesday, and on I think it was Instagram had a picture of him and his fiancee Mazel Micah, and AI Instagram just put a label on it, said it was made with AI.
Oh boy!
The show title on the end was "My AI Fiance" for him, but he couldn't get rid of it. He couldn't convince it. It just whatever signal was there, it said that. So they've changed it from "made with AI" to "AI info" to indicate it. So these are 3 efforts now to say, okay, we're dealing with it. But as you were just talking, Jason, I was thinking, I predict that within pick 2 years, this will not matter. That this whole, and I think I'm going to put it under the panic label. This whole idea of, well, we've got to know when it's AI. We've got to label it. Again, it's not about the technology, it's the human beings. Whatever tool you use to try to fool people, it could be AI, it could be hiring a voice double, it could be just lying. There's all kinds of ways you can try to fool people, and all kinds of things. You use Photoshop, obviously. You can use video platforms.
Right.
You can do lots of things to try to fool people or lie to them or defraud them. The issue, I'm not excusing the technology. I think that Émile was right when they said that there are biases and leanings built into certain technologies. What are you going to use Photoshop for? But to change a photo, right? But I think at some point we've got to shift the focus here to the human beings, the users who are doing things, their motives for doing things. The tools they use can make them more powerful, can make them more persuasive, can make them more effective at this. but it's still about what the human being has done. If an ad company tries to fool you that Jason Howell just endorsed Starbucks when he didn't, then the problem is Starbucks, not the technology.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that if the technology allows for, like, if it's relatively simple for a company like Meta or Google to recognize that something was created with a certain tool, and it can put that in some way, shape, or form, like if the ability is there to do that, personally, I don't see any harm in including that information.
Yeah,
but I think
true.
I think at the end of the day, it really comes down to what are our, how do we respond to what we see, regardless of what that information is? Do we see a video of Jason, me, aka me? I don't know why I referred to myself in the third person, but me, endorsing Starbucks when I didn't, and say, that's absurd. I know that Jason does not like Starbucks, which is not true. But
you're welcome to buy him some latte. just give to Jason, and you'll get him lattes.
There we go. Yeah, Starbucks. If you're interested in a brand deal, let me know. But I mean, if the technology exists to be able to do this with and to do it effectively, like, I don't see any reason not to necessarily do that, but to do that and expect that it's going to solve the problem, I think at the end of the day, that's what I have a hard time with. Like, it's great to spell it out, because for some people that's going to be enough. For some people that, because we've seen time and time again, some people are not the best judges of what is real and what is not. And, this kind of stuff is very easily fools a lot of people, I suppose, that I would think would be ridiculous, but other people fall for it. So I guess it doesn't hurt for that to be there. I just don't know how effective that's really going to be, and how much people care.
Yeah. Well, it's like the damn cookie notices we get on every single site we ever go to because of the Europeans and the EU.
Yeah.
It becomes noise.
Right. Yeah, oh, totally. And boy, while I was in Italy, I certainly saw my share of that. I thought it was bad over here. And I don't know if it was just, like, it might just be the same over there as over here as far as the notices.
No, it's more over there, because when they some companies are smart enough not to ask you here in the US, but over in Europe, they all have to. Oh, you were also new to the domain, so even sites you've gone to probably had to reaffirm that you said, okay, cookies, fine.
Right. Even though I feel like sites I go to all the time still ask me to do it. Anyways, it is, but the point being, it is total noise. It's like, I understand the intentions with this, but I don't think it's satisfying, the thing that it was created for necessarily. It just, you start to tune it out. It's just white noise, really.
Yep, I agree.
And then had another block here, a few stories about how AI is coming to the devices that we use, or maybe the devices that we haven't used yet, but might in the future, as is the case for me anyways, with the Apple Vision Pro. Apple's WWDC last month unveiled Apple Intelligence, AI, get it? Its major AI strategy for its phones and other devices. And Mark Gurman from Bloomberg confirmed that Apple Intelligence is indeed coming to the Vision Pro, which is its mixed reality headset, though it will likely require a separate paid subscription to take advantage of those features. We don't actually know what any of those features are necessarily as relates to the Vision Pro. But we know that the Vision Pro headset certainly, or I assume that it has the hardware to power this sort of infusion and to do some really interesting things with it. And I don't know, this is a sort of convergence of AI and mixed reality. I am really curious to see how this plays out, because I think both of them together could create, just from like a user who has used VR and AR headsets, and I get nerdy about like, oh wow, it feels real, and oh, this is really an interesting kind of like perceived experience instead of just like seeing it on a screen. I'm living it and feeling it, and there's a part of me that's like nerdily excited for how AI and mixed reality could potentially kind of come together in a Reese's peanut butter cup sort of way.
Well put.
I don't know that it's necessarily going to taste great, but I'm interested to see what happens.
But it's been interesting for me watching the reception so far to Microsoft's AI inside.
Yes, that's right.
Because it's the same kind of thing. Our phone, headset, computer, AI inside, And so far on the computer, people are kind of shrugging, I think. I mean, I haven't touched it and I haven't tried it, and it's not fully delivered in terms of what it could do. But I don't think that AI inside is a big deal, because a lot of what we're doing, we can all do on the cloud. It's not like it's going to be suddenly something so entirely new. I think your point about the headset is right. There may be things that have to happen locally to make the full power of it. Okay. And on the phone, there are things that will happen locally, including ad targeting, that may be more efficient, or translation or maps or things. When you were in Italy, if you had used your phone for translation and AI were inside and it could have the linguistic model, maybe that would make it better. Okay. But I think it's all incremental and minor. I don't think it's, oh my God, they've reinvented laptops. They've reinvented phones. No. And I think at this point, it certainly isn't worth paying more for. I got it. I had to buy, honey, I had to buy a new laptop. I had to get AI inside. Now, even as I say that, though, I still have a 6. What's your latest version of your phone?
Well, so I mean, Pixel 8 Pro is like my phone right now.
Okay, so I'm still on a 6. So as the 9 comes out, the presumption is there's going to be a lot of AI inside on the 9.
Of course, there is.
Use that as an excuse to get one. So I'll eat all these words I just said.
Yeah. Well, we can kind of get to the nut of it here and see if any of these new features that you might see on the Pixel 9, if you get the Pixel 9 when it comes out, are appealing to you, because we have an exclusive from Android Authority that kind of talks a little bit about this. Of course, I am an Android nerd, so I enjoy when we get little juicy nuggets like this. So essentially, the kind of the AI bundle, different than the TESCREAL bundle, that will be included on the Pixel 9 series is going to be called Google AI. So my initial thought was, oh no, they're renaming Gemini to Google AI. That is not my understanding after reading through this. I was like, okay, because I was like, you got to be kidding. Like Google and its naming, it just doesn't know what it's doing. No, Gemini is part of Google AI. So is Circle to Search. We already know about those. And then a few other features, one called Add Me, which they say make sure everyone's included in a group photo. So there's no specific detail on what this feature is, but it sounds like maybe when you're taking a group photo, there's the best take technology where you could take the best faces from each person in a group photo. If you had a series of them, maybe this is like an extension of that. So the person who's actually taking the photo could be included somehow. I don't know how that would, this is a total guess, but what that's going to be through the world of AI. A studio, which they say, quote, you imagine it, Pixel creates it, which really just sounds like generative AI, like image generation. Maybe it's emoji stickers. Apple actually just announced their Genmoji, which is part of Apple Intelligence. So creating emoji with generative AI wouldn't be too far off base to assume that. And then finally, something called Pixel Screenshots. And this says on this little kind of call out that Android Authority got a hold of. It says, find the info you need from your screenshots. When you take screenshots, I think they even have more about this. When you take your screenshots, it essentially is able to pull out details and information from the screenshot and allow it to be searchable. So, it could take a look at the information that you have embedded in there, summarize that information, answer questions about it, metadata, web links, app names, date taken, all that kind of stuff, which has some kind of similarity to kind of what you were alluding to, at least in part, Microsoft's recall for Windows 11, which does this on a system-wide level on PCs. It recognizes all the things that you're using your computer for and all the different images and whatever, and makes it all searchable. This is specific to screenshots, but and processed locally on device is my understanding. But any of these features roping you into the Pixel 9, or is this kind of like,
no.
Nope.
Which I say with disappointment, because I want to say, honey, I had to buy it.
Well, but you're Pixel 6. Well, my immediate reaction is you're a Pixel 6. It's time to upgrade. But I mean, Google does support their devices for longer. So if you don't need to, you don't need to.
When did the Pixel 6 come out?
Well, that's got to be 3 years at this point, right?
Yeah,
Pixel 6.
It's ancient. Honey, it's ancient. Sure, she had her iPhone for 20 years.
Yeah, by the time the 9 comes out, it'll be almost 3 years. October 28th, 2021 was the 6 and the 6 Pro. So,
all right, we'll see.
But don't ask me. I get phones every couple of months to review and stuff. So I'm clearly not the everyday user at this point. I don't know what the right approach is there. And then finally, and I'm so happy you included some random things. I kind of put them in a different order because I thought I could link them up. The surrealistic, or not surrealistic, the surrealist moment of generative AI. And I thought I'd start with this video that you included here that is really bizarre.
So to those of you who are listening, Jason will explain.
Oh yeah, so you included a link to a post on X by Autism Sock or whatever. Just anyways, I'll just tell you about it. There's a video, and trigger warning if you're watching the video, it is a bit kind of body horror-esque. They actually noted that in the tweet, so this might actually freak some people out. But it shows a generative AI's take on what gymnastics looks like, human gymnastics, and which is very, timely with the Olympics coming up. And I mean, the results are just bizarre and grotesque, and
bodies with 4 legs and no head, bodies that disappear into the mat, obviously doing things that are impossible to do, spinning around. It's just
limbs growing
wacky
out of other places suddenly, and at just the right time to catch them on the ropes and the horse and all that. I don't know.
Some sympathy to the machine. Gymnastics is miraculous and amazing what they do.
Yeah,
and for the machine trying to make of it. But the bigger point here, AGI ate around the corner. And I don't say that just
if it can't get gymnastics right, what can it do?
Right, and I don't say just for that. I'm not saying just to make it crack. I'm also saying that it has the disadvantage of having no reality. Yeah. We get to test things against a reality. We know what reality is until a certain age in life, and or unless on certain chemicals, and so we can say that's real, that's not. The machine has no mechanism to do that except what it's fed and what it's told. And so when it's in the process of making things up, of course it's not going to have a tie to reality. And it's not just about facts. It's also about how many fingers you have. Mm-hmm. That's hard for the machine.
Yeah. Well, and it really is that what you saw there, if you're watching the video version, is like the visual representation of what an LLM really does. It's, like an LLM doesn't actually have a wide understanding of the words that it's putting down. It's, as we've said many times on the show, it's predicting the next most likely word to come after the previous one that it just wrote.
Or the next leg that's going to go over the bar, even if you already have 3 other legs.
And so what you can end up seeing is just like seemingly total randomness. But maybe the 2 frames made sense together, but on the wide scope, it makes absolutely no sense. And the only reason that I put this here with another story that you put in there, the deluge of bonkers AI art is literally surreal. It's a Washington Post article that dives into the potential that what we're seeing is like this new kind of era of surrealist art, which I totally agree with. Like, although I'm sure true art aficionados and art snobs would, argue this until their dying day because it was created by a computer and, it wasn't a true artist with the raw emotion and desire and all this, the other things that motivates a real artist to create something beautiful or interesting or surreal. This is really, to a large degree, it's the result of humans interacting with computers to control the randomness of the computer's kind of programming or whatever you want to call it. And so we end up with these really strange images that if you're on Facebook, you see a lot of. They actually call it in the article slop, which they say is the image equivalent of spam. That's a term that I had never heard before in this context. But anyways, long story short, I think that coupled with, just this video that we're seeing of the gymnast, what it kind of, where I got with it is, I'm a horror movie aficionado, and there is
this is horror.
It's totally like there is a subset of horror films called body horror. It is a thing, and there are a lot of people that enjoy that particular type of art, and I could see something here in this gymnast video being compelling or kind of pulling on the same strings that lights a person like that up. So, again, like, who are we to say that this isn't art that we're looking at? It's strange art, and it was created very randomly by, an AI, but it's still compelling in its own weird, grotesque sort of way.
Yeah. So
You
so I
know?
put up one more thing, and then we'll end.
Yeah,
Where I want to recommend to our listeners and viewers.
sure.
Lev Manovich is in my world a very well known professor. He's at the City University of New York's Graduate Center. He's big in digital humanities, and he and a collaborator. Can you scroll up so I can get the collaborator's name,
yeah.
Jason? There
Here,
does it
let's
say
see.
Lev and
And
Emmanuel
Emmanuel
Ariely?
Ariely.
Yes.
Ariely.
Have written a book online, a chapter at a time on artificial aesthetics, and Lev is brilliant at this stuff, and I've read almost all of it, and it's compelling in a lot of places. But it argues that AI doesn't have a built-in aesthetics, which is interesting because if you look at some of the stuff in the Washington Post piece, it all has this kind of candy-coated look that comes from, I think, how it's trained and how people are using it, and we push it in our use into a certain way.
Mhm.
But does the technology itself come with an aesthetic? It's like asking whether it comes with a bias. Is it neutral? So he argues that. But the other part of it's interesting is that the technology, when it comes to creativity, the technology is just a tool, and it may, but it does have, and this is part of what Émile was saying, it does have some limited amount of agency. It is a collaborator as well. You're trying to get it to do something, but you're not in 100% control of it because there's something else inside this. And so this question of creativity and tools and aesthetics become really interesting around AI because the user tool relationship changes. And it'll be interesting to see whether the only time Sam Altman has had any contact with me, and I can't find it, he must have erased it. I looked at some of the early online AI generated art, and I made some crack about how it must have been trained by a bunch of softwares. And it really, I think, is all that Altman said to me. Hurt, but it does matter who trains this stuff. It does matter how it's judged as it goes. And so I wonder whether we're going to get to a point where other people can train it in other ways with different aesthetics and different perspectives, and maybe also find a way to restrict that the gymnast can't have 4 legs.
Yeah. I do think you're right. I think people are going to explore this deeper, and you will find the people who really get it on an extra level that isn't just, the slop that you come across on Facebook, which, I mean, as throwaway as it is or feels like when I see it, to a certain degree, it is its own art form too. It's just not an art form I really dig, but it works for somebody. Or maybe it serves a purpose. I don't know. It's a really interesting time for art and for the question of what defines art, especially now.
I don't do drugs because I'm too old and pathetic, but if you do, don't look at that video while you're on anything.
That's probably a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, even if you don't, you might not want to look at that video. Just fair warning for everyone. Big thanks to our return guest, Dr. Émile Torres. Wonderful conversation about TESCREAL and a great explainer on
spread the word about TESCREAL. When people start talking about artificial general intelligence and all that stuff, say there's another thing you need to know, and send them to Expresscology.
Yeah, exactly. And so thank you, Dr. Émile Torres. Thank you, Jeff. Gutenberg.com is the place that you can go, and you should. And you should stay tuned there, because not only can you get magazine and the Gutenberg parenthesis.
Soon enough, the WebWave will be out.
Soon enough, the Web. Show that again for video viewers. That was
the WebWave will be out in the fall.
That's an eye-catching cover.
It is. And Leo Laporte was nice enough to give me a wonderful blurb for the book, and I'm very grateful.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. I'm happy to hear that. Excellent. Can't wait. And then, of course, for this show, we record live usually every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern on the TechSploder YouTube channel, youtube.com/@TechSploder. Last few weeks we haven't done live because it was pre-recorded. I was in Italy, but I'm back, so we're going to be doing it again. So just follow and subscribe on the TechSploder channel, and you won't miss that. Like, rate, review, subscribe wherever you happen to listen or watch. Support us directly on Patreon if you want to make sure and, throw us a few bones every month so that we can continue to develop. We've got some ideas on different things we're working on to kind of expand on the show a little bit and see if we can offer a little bit more for you to get you through the door. That's patreon.com/AI Inside Show. And everything you really need to know about the show can be found wholesale at AIinside.show. That is it for this week's episode of AI Inside. Thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye.